Welcome to Mental Health Monday and this segment of Unscripted Story. My name is Jerri Walker and I'm a licensed professional counselor, and tonight I have with me Anna Robbins. Welcome, Anna. She is joining to tell her story, and I really just want to say thank you for being here. It takes courage to tell your story, and yet, as you probably have heard me say many times, that every time we feel listened to, we begin to heal.
That's true.
And so I am so glad that you made the choice. And I first became aware of what you had gone through and your story just within the last, week or two, that you posted on Facebook that you had gone through years of misdiagnosis. And within the last few years, you had finally seen someone, and we'll get to how that happened. But again, welcome. And tell us your story.
Well, I started struggling with what I thought was depression, actually as early as 6th grade. I remember having some big sad feelings that young. But I was also the oldest child. I don't know that that's important, but it did mean that I kind of felt like I had to be the good child too. So I think I developed a way to really put on a brave front and just kind of dealt with it for many years. Became really bad my senior year in high school. I remember that being a particularly bad year for me. And then when I was 18, I finally asked for some help and went to see a psychiatrist who told me I was depressed, and he put me on an antidepressant. And at the time, I didn't like it. But I also wasn't told that, it takes a month or more
Sure.
for those things to work. And I felt like it made me just too level. I guess I was used to not being level.
Not being level. And so I want to stop you right there, Anna. Because I do believe that there are probably parents watching and they're seeing something, but they're not sure. So did you make that decision to finally get help, or did somebody actually say, I'm observing, I'm seeing that maybe you're depressed? Was there anyone who was your advocate?
I'm having a hard time remembering for sure who. I was actually living out of the country at the time. I was in Costa Rica, but my mom, she's from there, had come to see me, how I was doing. I don't remember how we arrived at, why don't you go see a psychiatrist?
Okay.
So I don't remember for sure if I asked, or I think I probably did, because there definitely was a bit of, I don't want to call it looking the other way, maybe head in the sand a little bit, because I'm sure that's hard for parents to understand, or maybe they just thought it was normal teenage moodiness.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'm not 100% sure which
Okay.
one of us
Fair
came
enough.
to that decision, but
But you then, when you were 18,
Yeah.
you did seek help. Okay.
yes.
And so that was a psychiatrist?
It was a psychiatrist, but the interview was short, and I've found out since then that short interview is probably not a big enough interview. He prescribed something for me, and then about a month later, I actually came back to the United States. So once I got back here and I headed off to college, I was just kind of on my own, and I had gone off medication. I struggled. I had 2 kids when I was young. I was 19, had my first child, and so I felt like I had postpartum depression. Actually, it was after the second child that I had heard about postpartum depression at that point. So I felt like that was what I probably had. I'd talk to my gynecologist, and they'd give me again a little questionnaire. Yes, you're depressed. So I'd get on the antidepressants, and I feel like they kind of worked, but something just still wasn't right. And then I'd go off of them because I didn't necessarily feel like they were helping, or I didn't like the side effects. So that was my 20s. Just kind of, I think, a lot of on and off of an antidepressant. Feeling like I'd get to a point where it was bad and I'd seek out help. But I'd never go, I don't know why, I just never went at those times to a psychiatrist. I would go see my gynecologist or my family doc because that seemed easiest than to try and find somebody new to go see. And then when I came to Boise schools, when I got to hired in Boise schools, they have a counseling program that's free. Well, you get 6 sessions free through St. Alphonsus. So I did take advantage of those because I was experiencing massive anxiety and what I thought, again, was depression surrounding my new job, which I loved, but at the same time felt like a big job to me.
Yeah, because you're a music teacher,
Yes.
and that's what you've always taught.
So yeah,
Okay.
if I was a music teacher, I was teaching choir at the time, and Boise's choir program is really well known for high quality. So I felt the pressure for that quality to be there, and coming in after a teacher that had been there a very long time, it just felt very overwhelming at the time. So I went to a counselor. She recommended again that I go to a family doc and get an antidepressant, which I did. And I was on that again for a little while, and then off again. I didn't like the side effects, or it didn't feel like it was helping that much. And it might have been my husband at the time. He did feel like they helped. I guess from my perspective, I just didn't think they were helping enough to warrant the side effects that I was experiencing. So, on and off with counseling through the EAP program that they have for years. Not even sure how many years, until finally I was 39, I think. I went to one of them again, and I was discussing some things that had happened on a trip, and she recommended a nurse practitioner psychiatrist. She said, she should be able to fine-tune your medication a little better, since it seems like you haven't liked the medication you've been on, or you have not felt like it was doing what it needed to do. And I booked that appointment and was a month out, which I remember being a long time for me because I was quite distressed at the time. But I went, and this was an hour-long interview, which I'd never experienced before. When I'd go to Family Doc, it was a 2-page questionnaire, a 10-minute talk about how you're doing, and here's your antidepressant. So that was very new to me, and she was very thorough. And at the end, she gave me a diagnosis of bipolar 2, which is not quite as severe as bipolar 1, but is still not depression.
Right. So I want to back up just a moment because this is so important. for others to know. So when you said you continued to get antidepressants and you would feel a little different, but did you ever feel relief from the depression and just that, oh, okay, this is going to work, and I feel like, I can move about my world and not have this heaviness of depression?
The times that I can remember maybe that being lifted, I actually now recognize as hypomanic or manic.
Okay.
So I'd feel great, actually.
Yes.
I felt great sometimes, like just amazing. And yeah, I do remember now thinking sometimes when I'd see, has this been happening over, 2 weeks? Has this depressed mood happened over 2 weeks or 2 months or whatever on those questionnaires? And thinking at the time, like, well, yeah, I've been depressed a lot of days, but then there were days that I was fine and days that I was great. But I just assumed that was how depression worked. Like that,
Right.
That was part of it.
Right.
Like that I'd be okay sometimes.
Exactly. And I've even heard a client very recently said, well, my doc thinks that maybe it's just seasonal. It's just we don't have a lot of light these days, and so let's just trend it, again. And so your story again speaks to what I'm afraid so many people go through, is that in and out and trying to figure something out that is so difficult unless you really, really have someone like a psychiatrist who will spend that kind of time with you and do that kind of inventory and questionnaire with you to understand the cycles that are happening.
Right.
Yes. And okay, so she did that.
Yeah, and I do want to note that I thought I was doing the right thing because I kept going to counselors.
Yes.
I kept going to counselors at this program, and I just thought, I'm just having a relapse. That's what's happening, or I just need to go back on the antidepressants. That's what's going on. And that was all I knew. I mean, I knew that there were psychiatrists as well. I understood that they go to medical school versus,
Right.
counseling's a different, kind of a different medium. But I guess I didn't understand that probably a more full, that's not the word, diagnosis, a more detailed diagnosis would happen through there. And an understanding of the medications, I think, was also an important factor. So got that diagnosis. I got what's called a mood stabilizer, but I had an allergic reaction to it. And I went to the family doc because I didn't know it was an allergic reaction because it wasn't the typical one that you were supposed to look for. I just got really sick, and I don't know to this day whether that was also the medication or whether on top of it I just happened to get really sick and was having an allergic reaction. And the family doc took a look at the medication and said, "Why are you on this? This is a dangerous medication. You're not bipolar, are you? You don't think you're bipolar." And that was enough for me to doubt that diagnosis at the time. He dismissed it completely, and obviously that medication was not going to work, but I also didn't go back to get a different one. And he gave me a new antidepressant. And 3 years later, I had a 3-day stay in a mental hospital. So it is difficult to know that, especially at that point that I spent 3 years after a proper diagnosis still not being properly treated for it. And yeah, so that was.
So then at that point, you received the diagnosis that the nurse practitioner had?
I went to, and actually I got my timeline wrong. It was a year later that I ended up in the hospital. At the time, after I got dismissed, I'm so bad with words today. Well, after I left the hospital, discharged, that's the word I'm looking for. After I got discharged, I did a follow-up with Family Doc. Oh, and interestingly enough, and this is the hard part about mental hospitals, they just don't have the manpower or the time. In there, I was still not given a bipolar 2 diagnosis to walk out the door with. So yeah, went back to Family Doc for a check-in after being discharged, and he said, oh, here's the number of a psychiatrist that I like to work with. But it still took me the better part of 9 months to actually make that call. And a lot of it was, I was worried about the expense. I was just another doctor, especially after a hospital stay, which is very expensive. So I do want to note that antidepressants in bipolar people can actually push them to become manic. And that is likely what happened right before my hospital stay. Not necessarily that I was depressed, but that I was actually manic. And I mentioned also that mania, you can feel great, happy, but it can also feel, because that summer, it felt like I was crawling out of my skin every single day. And I didn't know what was going on, and I kept waiting for that antidepressant to kick in. And I'd sit there every day, and I was just, it felt like hell. And I'd feel better as the sun went down, I don't know why. And it'd start over the next day. It's hard for me, teachers have summers off. It's hard for me to actually have that time off. I think it gives me a little too much time for my brain to overwork a little bit. So this was summertime, and I'd sit there and I wouldn't know what to do because I had this energy, but I didn't know how to direct it. And anything that I felt like I could direct it towards, I just didn't want to for some reason. So just, yeah, like I was crawling out of my skin. And that was not a sign of depression. That was the other side. Yeah. So a lot of times people think that the mania might be fun, or that you might be happy when you're like that, but it can also have that kind of effect where
edgy,
yes, and yes, yeah. So yeah, anyway, so it took me another 9 months to just decide that I just couldn't live like that anymore. And I was still on that antidepressant because it's terrible, but it was one that actually made me lose weight where the others I had gained weight on. So I thought, well, this isn't working very well as an antidepressant, but hey, I like what it did to me, which is awful reason to stay on a medication, but there it is. So yes, I went to this psychiatrist that my doctor had recommended, and received the exact same diagnosis. And now knowing that I was allergic to the medication that's most often used, She gave me something different. I was also diagnosed with a couple of anxiety disorders on top of that. And we're coming up on 2 years. Well, in the spring it'll be 2 years. And it is a big difference.
So you finally, after almost 20, how many years?
Yeah, it was, do you think 6th grade? I think I was 11 or 12.
Wow.
Yeah, so that is 30 years. I mean, granted, the misdiagnosis didn't happen until I was 18, so that was more like 21 years.
Of going to counselors, going to doctors, going to psychiatrists, consistently getting the wrong diagnosis, not getting better, and finally,
Yeah.
someone listened. And you begin for the first time to receive treatment meant for your diagnosis of bipolar 2.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my, Anna, that's just such a hard story to hear. It's so difficult as a clinician, as a woman, as a person. I mean, it's just so hard to hear. We tend to want to find, the answers when we go to our doctors, and I'm not throwing anyone under the bus here. It's just that persistence that you had, even though it was over a long period of time, there's something that just kept you going back because you continually recognized, I'm not better. And even when you did feel better, then that was a little weird because that was your mania, and that, like you say, you might feel good for a little while, but then it's turns into something else. And so I just wonder if someone isn't hearing this story and saying, whoa, I can really identify what can you offer? What can you say that might make a difference for them to reach out and get some help?
I think that phone call is hard to make for some reason.
Yes.
But if you can just make the phone call and find the right person, if they're not listening to you for a long time, if you're not filling out a detailed questionnaire and going over it and going over some things that have happened and
Right. Even doing what you just said, stopping and doing a bit of an inventory. And if you haven't done that, starting like right now, right today, how is it I feel? And, keeping track of that, even for 30 days, if you're still wondering, I don't know, I think this may just be that it's winter and I always get depressed in the winter, and many people do, and It is seasonal. Or if a loss has just happened, no, this is because a loss has just happened. But keeping that inventory, that feeling journal, basically, can, I think, help also. So you have something to look back on and go, oh yeah, 3 weeks ago I was really, really, really down, and now today I don't feel that way, but something's still not right. And that whole thing about antidepressants, there's a lot of great articles written on how that misdiagnosis adds to the problem, when especially our antidepressants that are the SSRIs, the serotonin based meds, can cause, they are not designed for a bipolar diagnosis.
if anything, even though I have bipolar 2, I'd characterize that summer as a full-blown 2-month manic episode.
Okay.
So, which definitely puts it closer to the one category, but yeah, it can do that.
Okay. How has your life changed now since you finally got diagnosed, you finally were treated and on meds that help? How has that made a difference for you?
I didn't realize how much energy I was putting in to make myself a normal person.
Yes.
To manage what I was doing and how I was reacting to people every day, or how I was feeling, or at least not to show how I was feeling, because also part of mania is being very irritable sometimes, or things like that. And I feel it feels nice to not have to direct that energy towards that, and to be it's odd to feel level, actually. It's just something I've not experienced before, but it's good because through all these years, it was my children that I was hanging on for. And it's good to be able to interact with them in a way that is more loving. And
you get to be present for them now, don't you?
yes,
And most importantly, you get to be present for you. Because as you just said, all of that energy focusing on what is wrong, and now you get to just be, and that leveling out is huge, to be able to have that now and be present for your kids, for you. And I think of all the kids you teach, and you impact their lives. And does it just feel across the board now that, you have energy for even more?
yes,
Yeah.
I do.
Mm-hmm.
It's been, the difference has been amazing. And that's not to say that I'm completely level all the time.
Right.
But the medication has managed it enough for me that, and also my knowing and being aware of the
Yes.
symptoms of bipolar, being able to categorize something that I'm feeling in the proper way helps me also know how to manage it, or helps me know where I am. So
Yes.
that's been very helpful as well. Not just the medication, but just knowing what these symptoms are
Exactly.
and why they're happening.
And that awareness, and having someone that you see that actually knows, and knows how to treat. And if you do, like you say, some days are not on the level, and so those dips are normal, and having that person in your village that knows you and understands your diagnosis and how you relate to your diagnosis is huge. Anna, thank you. Again, it was difficult to hear this story, and yet affirming that you have journeyed through this and continued and were persistent, and finally were diagnosed and treated. And today it is different for you. So, is there anything that you would like to say to someone that might be listening that is going through all that questioning and wondering and has had years of this? What would you like to offer them?
It can be really hard to ask for help and to admit when something's wrong. But if you can just make that one phone call to start that journey, it might have to be more phone calls later.
Yes.
But taking that step is the hard part, but the most rewarding, I think.
Yes. And it takes tremendous courage to do that. And even if you're sitting there tonight and you're going, yeah, I think I may need to do this, but maybe you need to just call a friend and have that friend be with you when you make that call, or a family member, whoever it is that you feel is your advocate and in your corner. Bring them on board. Let them know how you're feeling. Let them know what you're thinking, and join together in making the call. You are not alone. And there is help out there, but making that first step can make all the difference in your future. I'm so glad that you've joined us tonight. We've opened up probably something that may be very difficult for some of you to hear. So, because you are not alone, please know that you can contact the church. You can email me. I'm sure Anna would be willing to talk with you as well.
I have talked to friends through the process
Absolutely,
as well.
absolutely. So take the step and just make that decision and contract with yourself that you're not going to accept where you are right now, that there is help and that there is a healthier way and future for you to live. Thank you again for being with us, and we'll look forward to our next time. And Anna, thanks again for your story.